Tonight at 10, every child in the UK aged between 12 and 15 is set to be offered a single dose of the Pfizer vaccine. After weeks of deliberation on the likely benefits to young people, the chief medical officers have concluded it's the right move.
It is an important and potentially useful additional tool to help reduce the public health impacts that come through educational disruption.
And for the over 50s, they can expect confirmation tomorrow that booster vaccines will be made available to them. We'll have the latest on the changes as experts warn of growing pressure on the NHS in the coming months. Also tonight, nearly a third of people travelling into England and Northern Ireland earlier this year may have broken the quarantine rules. The BBC obtains and verifies footage showing civilians being killed by the Taliban in Afghanistan. And after her dazzling triumph in New York, Emma Raducanu's marketing potential is being measured in hundreds of millions of dollars.
And coming up in the sport on the BBC News channel, Everton look to keep up their unbeaten start to the Premier League season against Burnley. Can they move into the top four with victory?
Good evening. After weeks of deliberation among medical experts, it's been decided that some 3 million children aged from 12 to 15 should be offered a single dose of the Pfizer COVID vaccine, with the rollout starting as soon as next week. The chief medical officers responsible for England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland said one of the key reasons for going ahead was to help children's education. Earlier this month, a different body, the Vaccines Watchdog, had advised against the policy, saying that the likely health benefits were too small. But ministers in all parts of the UK are now expected to approve the policy. And tomorrow, it's thought that they'll also announce a programme for booster vaccinations for the over 50 people. Our medical editor, Fergus Walsh, has more details.
I'm looking for 4 right-angled triangles.
There's a new formula for vaccination. 10 days ago, the scientists on the JCVI Advisory Committee said there were only marginal health benefits from immunising all 12 to 15-year-olds. Now the UK's 4 top doctors have concluded the wider benefits for education and mental health make giving a single dose the right answer. England's Chief Medical Officer, Chris Whitty, a pivotal figure in the pandemic, said vaccination would help prevent disruption to learning.
We do not think that this is a panacea. This is not a silver bullet. It's not a single thing that on its own will do so. But we think it is an important and potentially useful additional tool to help reduce the public health impacts that come through educational disruptions.
Isn't there a danger that many parents and indeed children are going to be left confused after the JCVI didn't recommend vaccines for this age group and now you are?
In medicine, you have to take factors into account, some of which are very direct and some of which are broader, and that's a pretty standard way of approaching risk and benefit. So we would see this as not in conflict.
If you measure that angle there...
Like schools across the UK, St Margaret's Academy in Liverpool has faced huge disruption over the pandemic. At some points, more than half its 1,000 pupils have been self-isolating rather than in class, so they support today's decision.
It's been very, very difficult. The sooner we can get back to the routine of everybody coming into school without the disruption caused by the virus, the better. And this is a major step in helping us do that.
The decision on whether to vaccinate is always a balance of benefits versus risks. For every 1 million first doses of Pfizer vaccine given to healthy 12 to 15-year-olds, it's estimated it will prevent 2 admissions to intensive care and 87 admissions to hospital. On the risks, there'll be between 3 and 17 cases of myocarditis, inflammation of the heart, which can also be triggered by COVID. The symptoms include chest pain, shortness of breath and palpitations, but these are mostly mild and short-lived. After so much toing and froing on this issue, what do parents make of it?
Got a daughter who's nearly 14, so we have no problem with her getting her vaccinated.
I'm not sure. I really don't know. I don't know. At the moment, I'll probably say no.
It's a contentious issue, but I think it should be compulsory to have vaccinations across all age groups.
From the young to the old. A programme of third booster jabs will be confirmed tomorrow, initially for the over 70s, starting with care home residents. The aim, to counter any waning of immunity and give the maximum protection over winter to those most at risk from COVID. Fergus Walsh, BBC News.
Well, this afternoon there was also a warning from the Chief Medical Officer, Professor Chris Whitty, about the pressures that COVID will impose on the NHS in the coming months. Tomorrow, Boris Johnson is expected to publish his government's plans for dealing with coronavirus during this winter, with the NHS already under pressure, reporting high levels of hospital admissions right across the UK. Our health editor, Huw has the story.
A health system already under strain. That's the reality in many areas ahead of the government's winter plan for England to be announced tomorrow. NHS leaders in Nottinghamshire have asked local people to only come to A&E if there are urgent, life-threatening emergencies.
We've just got busier, the lockdowns have eased, people have come in with very sick people with COVID and other things, but also we're seeing a rise in people coming with simpler things, and we really encourage people not to come unless they really, really have to.
Hayley, who's pregnant, hasn't yet been vaccinated. She's now in hospital with COVID.
I knew it was COVID straight away because I felt like fog over my chest. I was struggling with my breathing, and being pregnant, you already, you've got extra problems anyway as it is.
Daily COVID hospital admissions in the UK fell back in the spring, but then started picking up again in July, following an increase in cases. After coming back a bit, the increase continued through August and into this month. And at times recently, there have been more than 1,000 hospital admissions a day.
And what does that screen say now?
3.10.
The Prime Minister today, visiting a British gas training academy, will set out a plan for managing COVID, and he wasn't totally ruling out reimposing some restrictions if there was another virus surge.
We've got to do everything that's right to protect the country, but the way things are going at the moment, we're very confident in the steps that we've taken. I'll be setting out a lot more tomorrow.
We have seen a levelling off.
Experts point out there was hardly any flu to deal with last winter. This time it'll be different.
Of course, with complications such as flu, other types of viruses and winter illnesses that start to build up, we are going to see much added pressure on the healthcare service that we haven't yet dealt with when there has been this number of COVID cases.
Nicola Sturgeon has said she can't remember a time when Scotland's hospitals have been busier. The Scottish Government's announced that, unlike England, vaccine passports will be adopted at some venues. The Welsh Government will decide on that soon. There are no plans to do so in Northern Ireland. For all the UK's governments, there's huge uncertainty over just what the winter will bring. Huw, BBC News.
Let's have a look then at the latest figures on the pandemic. They show there were 30,825 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period, which means an average of over 34,521 new cases per day in the past week. There were more than 8,200 people in hospital with the virus, that's as of last Friday. 61 deaths were reported in the latest 24-hour period, people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID test. That's an average of 141 deaths per day in the past week. And just over 89% of people aged 16 or over have now had their first vaccination, and 81% have been double vaccinated. Well, with us in the studio is our medical editor, Fergus Walsh. And Fergus, can we talk then about two groups of people that we're really concerned with tonight? 12 to 15 and this policy change, and then the over 50s. Let's start with the young ones.
So the rollout for the 12 to 15-year-olds will start in schools in England next week, ministers confirmed tonight. And that decision on whether to vaccinate them has really been finely balanced. The chief medical officers accept that the health benefits themselves are marginal, but add in the educational advantages, and they say there's a clear benefit in the children's best interest to have that jab. Parents are going to be asked for their consent, but it's expected to be a conversation now in homes across the country. And in cases of disagreement between parents and children, if the child is considered competent to make that decision, they will have the final say, as happens with other medical treatment. Now, just one dose they'll get at this stage. Children get such a good immune response. Most of the benefit comes from that first dose. And the likelihood of heart inflammation is higher after the second.
So that's the 12 to 15s. What can the over 50s be expecting tomorrow?
Well, the older you are and the more vulnerable, the sooner you're going to get a booster jab. This will be at least 6 months after your second dose of vaccine. It's likely that Pfizer may well be used as the third dose, as has happened with the immunocompromised. 500,000 people are getting a third Pfizer dose, whether or not they got AstraZeneca. Now, we'll get the full details on that tomorrow. 2 doses of vaccine are still giving very strong protection against serious illness, but a third booster dose will top up immunity, and it's likely to be a flu jab in one arm and the booster dose in the other, because COVID won't be the only threat this winter.
Indeed, Fergus, many thanks again. Fergus Walsh, our medical editor, with the latest there. Nearly a third of people travelling into England and Northern Ireland between March and may have broken the quarantine rules. An investigation by the BBC has found more than 300,000 cases were passed to investigators during that time. The UK government has not been able to confirm how many of these were found to have broken the rules or couldn't be traced. Our political correspondent Alex Forsyth has the story.
Think back to spring this year. Getting on a plane was only allowed if it was essential. Rules meant to limit the spread of COVID variants. If you did travel from certain countries on a red list, you had to quarantine in a hotel when you landed. Most other travellers had to isolate at home for 10 days. Like Henrik, he arrived back in England in April after visiting family in Poland. He received one call to check he was self-isolating, but he says not much else.
Well, it wasn't effective at all because it didn't track and trace me at all. Like I said, I could have gone out to the supermarket had I so desired. There was no contact with anybody at all.
Between mid-March and the end of May this year, just over 1 million people arrived in England and Northern Ireland who had to self-isolate for 10 days by law. Scotland and Wales had separate systems. During this period, more than 6 million calls were made to check people were complying. But in more than 300,000 cases, around 3 in 10, there were doubts that rules were being followed, so they were referred for further checks.
People were referred if, for example, they didn't cooperate with check calls or repeatedly failed to answer. Then they might have had a visit from police or from a private firm employed by the Home Office to ramp up these checks. The government says most people were found to be self-isolating, but it hasn't provided a figure or said how many people couldn't be traced at all.
In a statement, the government said, the Home Office looks to visit all individuals referred to us by NHS Test and Trace who are required to isolate at home following international travel. We visit over 99% of the cases referred to this service. Long-standing critics of the government's border policy say it demonstrates weaknesses in the system during the period the Delta variant took hold in the UK.
This shows that the problems with the home quarantine system and also the failure to put India on the red list early enough together made it much easier for the Delta variant to spread before the vaccines were fully rolled out. That's what led us then to the third wave and the big delays in being able to lift lockdown restrictions.
International travel is building up again, and with the virus still circulating around the globe, there will be questions about the government's approach, not least if another variant takes off. Alex Forsyth, BBC News.
You are watching On Demand.
The BBC has obtained and verified footage showing civilians being killed by the Taliban in Afghanistan. It's further verified that more than 20 people have been killed in Panjshir province, where the Taliban have been fighting opposition forces. A Taliban spokesman has denied any such killings are taking place, but based on our reporting, says that they will investigate. Some of the details in our correspondent Yalda Hakim's exclusive report might be distressing.
A reign of terror on the streets of Kabul. The Taliban bundled 2 men into the back of a car. The BBC has established that this disappearance took place in the past few days, in an area of the capital where people are known for their opposition to the Taliban. The Panjshiri community is now desperately searching for any information on the fate of their loved ones. The BBC has also confirmed that the Taliban are committing human rights abuses in the Panjshir Valley. It lies 100 miles northeast of Kabul. A warning, you may find this video distressing. Here, a man in military clothes is dragged away. It's unclear whether he was in the army. This is common dress in the valley. Voices are raised. Seconds later, he's shot several times and killed. We're not showing you those images. A bystander insists the man they've just killed was not in the military. The BBC has confirmed that more than 20 people have been killed since the Taliban entered the province. One of them was a shopkeeper and father of two called Abdul Sameh. He was accused by the Taliban of selling SIM cards to resistance fighters. Locals had urged him to leave when the Taliban arrived, but he said he was just a poor man who had nothing to do with war. A Taliban spokesperson told the BBC that civilians are not being targeted.
We'll launch an investigation. I have no information about this case and the location it happened. However, if some military personnel or militia attacked our soldiers, our fighters have the right to defend themselves.
Human Rights Watch says the Taliban are breaching international law.
We're actually documenting human rights violations across the country. And what seems to be happening in Panjshir, as well as in other places, are these summary executions and detentions, particularly of former security forces.
When the Taliban entered the valley, they promised peace and stability. But these pictures show that people are not waiting to see if the Taliban will keep their word. With telecommunications cut, it's hard to get information out. But the international community is warning the Taliban that they are watching and that they will be held accountable for their actions. Yalda Hakim, BBC News.
A court in New York is hearing the next stage of a civil case being brought against Prince Andrew, Duke of York, in relation to allegations of sexual assault, allegations that he has consistently denied. Our North America correspondent, Neda Tawfiq, is in New York with the latest for us.
Well, those proceedings have now concluded. Of course, the first one in the case of Virginia Giuffre's against Prince Andrew, alleging that he sexually assaulted her in New York, London, and the U.S. Virgin Islands when she was just 17 years old. Allegations that he strongly denies. Now, this first hearing really focused on procedure more so than the allegations in the charges. The court was notified today that Prince Andrew had chosen a lawyer who would represent him. Now, in court, he made two main arguments. He said that the complaint had not been properly served to Prince Andrew, that the High Court in the UK would have to weigh in on the legality of that. Secondly, he called this lawsuit baseless and without merit. He was arguing that a settlement agreement between Virginia Giuffre in 2009 in Florida and Jeffrey Epstein, of course, the associate of the prince who committed suicide while awaiting federal charges in court, they believe that that lawsuit essentially releases the Duke from any potential liability. So they have requested a copy of that sealed agreement.
Neda, many thanks once again. Neda Tawfiq there for us in New York. Let's have a look at some of the day's other news now then. A new blood test that aims to detect more than 50 types of cancer before symptoms appear is starting formal clinical trials across England. The aim is to recruit 140,000 volunteers, rising to 1 million by 2024. If the trials are a success, the new test could revolutionise cancer treatment around the world. 60 people have been arrested after climate protesters blocked several slip roads onto the M25 during the morning rush hour, causing huge delays. The protesters, Insulate Britain, want the government to speed up efforts to insulate homes to help combat global warming. Andrew Neil has resigned as the chairman and lead presenter of GB News. The journalist and former BBC presenter was on air for just 2 weeks following the launch of the channel in June before taking a break. He is apparently expected to continue as a guest commentator. This year is on track to be one of the warmest globally, with July being the hottest month since records began. Big cities are struggling with rising temperatures, which can cause respiratory problems, heat strokes and even death. the start of a series looking at the challenge for countries facing living with temperatures of up to 50 degrees Celsius. Farah Javed reports on one man's mission to find a solution in Karachi, in Pakistan.
Karachi, home to more than 16 million people, one of the biggest and hottest cities in the world, and its residents are suffering. Mother of 5, Khurshid Qadri, is struggling to cope with the searing heat. There is no way she can afford air conditioning.
मैं 35 साल से कराची में रह रही हूँ। बहुत गर्मी है, अब पहले इतनी नहीं थी जितनी अब शदीद गर्मी है।
In 2015, they endured a 45 degrees Celsius heat wave. 1,200 people died from dehydration and heat stroke. And this year, the temperature is nearly that high again.
Here in the heart of Karachi, it's almost unbearable to be standing out in the street. It's only 11 o'clock and the sun is beating down, and the pollution, it makes it even worse. Some here wonder how long they can go on like this.
Businessman Shahzad Qureshi thinks he has a solution to cool the whole city, building urban forests.
मेरा ये ख्याल था उस वक्त, मैंने ख्वाब ये देखे कि यार ओहो हम तो कराची की किस्मत बदल सकते हैं। 3 साल में या जंगलों से इसको भर देंगे, यहाँ तो टेम्परेचर चेंज हो जाएगा शहर का।
This is the first urban forest that Shahzad planted. Just 3 years ago, it was filled with piles of rubbish, but look at it now. There are more than 1,000 trees, and in here, it can be up to 6 degrees cooler than in the rest of the city.
I don't know if you have noticed the amount of birds. Chipper, 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 constant you will hear that. And this has not happened in what? Several years now.
Urban forestry has been recommended the world over. I think the challenge is to scale it up. I don't think there are very many deniers now. People have understood that it is important. It's just, to walk the talk and put the money where the mouth is. That is what is needed.
But to build more urban forests, Shahzad needs financial support from the authorities. In meeting after meeting with local officials, he gets turned down until finally some good news.
Land is there, the will is there, let's do it.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Let's do it, man.
He's beginning work on his new forest.
इस जगह को देख के जो है ना मेरे लिटरली रोंगटे खड़े हो रहे हैं। तो आज से आगाज इंशाल्लाह इसका।
One man's effort in the collective struggle to cool our planet. Farhad Javed, BBC News, Karachi.
And there'll be more from life at 50 degrees and how humans are adapting to climate change across the BBC outlets in the coming weeks. And there's more on that data in that report just there on the BBC News website, bbc.co.uk/news. Emma Raducanu, Britain's first female Grand Slam champion in tennis for 44 years and destined to be a global superstar, is insisting that she's not thinking too far ahead, just trying to take success in her stride. But the $2.5 million she won in prize money in New York could soon be dwarfed by the sums being mentioned in marketing circles, where she's been described as a solid gold prospect. One marketing executive said that there was no limit to what she could achieve as one of the most marketable athletes on the planet. Our sports editor Dan Rowan has more details.
18-year-old champion Emma Raducanu joins us live in Times Square this morning.
This is Good Morning America.
Having conquered the US Open, Britain's newest sporting superstar proving a hit on American TV earlier, the biggest networks queuing up to speak to the teenage tennis sensation.
If you just do the best you can with every single day, time flies and you can really achieve anything with inner belief.
Raducanu's been thrown into the spotlight in a way no one predicted after producing one of sport's greatest ever fairy tales. But today a British Grand Slam winner from a different era warned that the youngster's newfound fame would need to be carefully managed.
She has the potential to be a world number one and a multiple Grand Slam champion. We've got to give her time to develop. And if it doesn't happen within the next 12 months, it probably will happen in the 12 months after that. And we've got to protect her because her world, it's going to hit her like a sledgehammer. I don't think she realises what's coming her way.
Having sprung from relative obscurity just a few weeks ago, Raducanu's now one of the world's most marketable athletes.
大家好，我想说谢谢。
The teenager, whose mother is Chinese, thanking fans in fluent Mandarin, the latest sign of her global appeal.
I think quite quickly her sponsorship earnings off the court will dwarf her prize money on the court. She is the most marketable British athlete since David Beckham because she is the complete package. She's young, she's already winning millions of social media followers, which increases her influence as a brand. She has a multicultural background and she won her Grand Slam in America, one of the most important consumer markets in the world.
Here at the LTA's headquarters, tennis chiefs insist much more investment is still needed into publicly available park courts and indoor facilities like this one, if Raducanu's success is to translate into a much-needed surge in participation. But there's no doubt the women's game has just had its biggest boost in decades.
And today, the men's champion at Flushing Meadows paid this tribute to Raducanu's achievement.
It's like a Cinderella story. I mean, it's just unbelievable because she didn't have a WTA match win outside of Grand Slams. She only has a win in Wimbledon and US Open. I mean, all this story is just for books, actually.
Raducanu's hit the big time here in the Big Apple, basking in her newfound fame. And if the pitfalls and pressure that can accompany such attention are avoided, there seems no limit to the impact that she can have. Dan Rowan, BBC News.
That's it from us. We are just getting reports tonight that Charlotte Johnson, mother of the Prime Minister Boris Johnson, has died suddenly and peacefully, according to those reports, in a London hospital today. She was 79 years of age. There'll be more on the BBC News channel for you, but now on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Have a good night.